Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 6 topics from the Hindu and the Indian Express, along with the mains, value addition, and practice questions. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion regarding the controversy surrounding the constitution of the high-level committee on demographic changes, especially in the context of the religious angle involved. Then in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the projections of weak monsoon, the causative factors, and the way forward. Then in the prelims pointers, we'll have a discussion regarding 4 different topics from a special perspective of the upcoming UPSC prelims, and also we'll have a discussion regarding the mains value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is about the Hindu-Muslim demographic debate. Like human beings, the nation states are organic entities. They grow and shrink with time. The most important component of any nation state is the population. That is, the people residing within that particular territory. The change or the study of the change with respect to the population is known as demography. Simple. This study can be done on the basis of the change with respect to the number of people, or with respect to the change we talk about the average age of the population, or with respect to the socio-economic backgrounds, anything. Why this is important? Because if the government of that particular nation state has adequate and robust data with respect to that demography, the demography of that particular country, then it can come up with more effective policies. And then those effective policies would usher in more socio-economic development. That's it. Why this is important is for the reason that recently the government of India has constituted a high-level committee to look into the demographic changes, especially in the context of the illegal infiltration, the illegal migration which we are witnessing across the borders. And also, there's one more word which has been there in the terms of reference, that is to look into the changes with respect to the religious and social characteristics of the population. What the author says is that right now, India is witnessing very important transitions in the overall demography. The very first thing he says is that in India, the total fertility rate has already gone below the replacement level. So with the time, we would see the shrinking of the population. Second thing, what he says is that right now, we also have a youth bulge. So adequate opportunities need to be provided to the youth. Third thing, what he says is that with the time, India would also witness an aging population, and there are data to support it. Then he counters the narrative of the government. What he says is that rather than focusing on these important points, the government is focusing on those points which are not that relatively important. And therefore, there is a narrative which is being created. That is what the author says. So what we'll do is we'll talk about this particular narrative, and we'll have a discussion on the basis of the data. Okay, we'll just look at the picture from the perspective of the civil services, right? We'll not go into the debates of it. Then we'll talk about that ideally what should be the basis on which the government should study the demography. And then we'll also talk about the way forward. Very important topic of GS1 and also with respect to GS2 and GS3. Now, as I said, what is the context? So the government of India has constituted a high-level committee on demographic change. According to the author, there are some very important challenges with respect to demography. The very first important challenge is that we are going to see a shrinking in the population. Why? Because the total fertility rate has already gone below the replacement level. Second thing is that we have a good number of youths in the country who still don't have the adequate opportunities. So we need to look at that particular aspect. We need to look at that particular front and provide them the adequate opportunities. Third thing is that we are going to see a boom in the aging of the population. By 2050, according to the United Nations itself, we'll have almost 1/5 of the total population as elderly population, more than 300 million. Okay? So these are the important real challenges. What are the committee's term of references? So what the author says is that the committee is not looking at these important things as at these important changes. Rather, the committee is looking at what the government has told the committee to look into. The very first thing is to look into the illegal infiltration which we are witnessing across the borders, right? Primarily with respect to Bangladesh. Second thing, to look at the changes on the basis of the religion and the socio-economic characteristics. Religion specifically in terms of that what all changes we are witnessing as far as the population of Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs or other religions are concerned. So this is what the terms of reference are. But what is this demographic transition? See, as countries develop, as countries become more socio-economically advanced, they basically transition from high death rate and high birth rate to that of low birth rate and low death rate. This is what the demographic transition means, and this is what India is also witnessing. So this is the study of the population, what we call as demography. Now, if you look at India's demographic transition, the big picture, if I were to give you the data, in 1951, the total fertility rate of India was 5.9, the total fertility rate. According to the NFHS data 5, the NFHS 6 has also been published, but the details are not published. So we'll talk about the NFHS 5 right now. The NFHS 5, which is a data of 2019 and 2021, it says that the total fertility rate of India is 2.0. Now this is obviously below the replacement level, which is 2.1. Which means with the time we would witness a shrinking of the population, and it has substantially reduced from 5.9 to that of 2.0, the total fertility rate. Implication kya hai? That from this narrative of population explosion, what we would see is population stabilization. But the point is, what about the youths? What about the youths of the country? We say that we are witnessing a demographic dividend. A major chunk of the population is below the age of 35 years of age. Almost 65% of the population is below the age of 35 years of age. So how to basically manage this particular thing? Because if you're not going to provide the adequate opportunities, what is going to be the future of these youths? There are many people, and we'll look at the data. There are many people who are well educated, who are postgraduate, who have the PhDs, but still they don't have any of the employment opportunities. So this is a grave concern. Next thing is that not just the youth bulge, but we are also witnessing the aging of the population. According to the United Nations Population Fund Agency's number, by the year 2050, almost 1/5 of the total population would be elderly, more than 60 years of age. And this number, it is equivalent to almost 300 million by the year 2050. So what it means is that on one hand, and this is important to understand, on one hand, the government should rather focus on coming up with the adequate opportunities for the youths. And on the other hand, the government should rather also focus on the aging population, which means that adequate geriatric care, the pension, the health-related aspects of these elderly population should be provided. So this should be the focus of the government, not just the other aspects. See, illegal infiltration across the borders is a very important security threat. It's a very important security issue. It cannot be negated. But that cannot be the front issue as far as the overall demographic change is concerned. That is what the author is saying. Now, what the central issue of the article is that India's real demographic change is not what the terms of reference of the committees are. We've already discussed the terms of reference. Terms of reference primarily include that what the committee has been asked to do. The things which the government has asked. For example, once we study the Finance Commission, we also talk about the terms of reference. The terms of reference as in what the government has asked the commission or the committee to look into. In this case, the government has specifically talked about the illegal migration, especially with respect to the Bangladesh border, right? And also the religious changes which we are observing, but not the other important issues which the author has highlighted. So this is again a very important concern. Next thing which the author highlights is that if you look at the composition of this particular committee, you will see that it has a Supreme Court judge, it has an IAS officer, an IPS officer, an economist, but this committee does not have a demographer. This committee does not have a population scientist. So the author is questioning the credibility of this committee itself. That if the committee does not have a person who is expert in the studies of the population, then how would the committee come to an effective solution? That is what the author is saying. Now, let's talk about the facts versus perception, because there is a common narrative which is set, which is Muslims will eventually outnumber the Hindus because of higher fertility rate. Let's look at the numbers which are provided by the government itself. If you look at the NFHS 5 data, National Family Health Survey 5 data, now this is with respect to 2019 and 21. Total fertility rate of Hindus, it is 1.94. For Muslims, it is 2.36. Okay. So obviously, there's no denial to this fact. The fertility rate of Muslims is more than that of the Hindus. But if you look at the historical trend, if you look at the pace with which the fertility rates have reduced, look at this. In 92 and 93, the Hindu total fertility rate was 3.3 and the Muslim total fertility rate was 4.4. In 2019-21, it is 1.94 and this is 2.36. Means what? That if you look at the gap with which, the pace with which the gap has narrowed, it has narrowed more for the Muslims. So there has been a significant, the pace at which the gap has narrowed, it is more for that of the Muslims, right? And over here by fertility gap, I mean to say, if you just look at this number from 3.3 and look at this 4.4, so the difference is 1.1 and over here the difference is somewhere around 0.42. So that is what the fertility gap has narrowed more for the Muslims as compared to the Hindus. But what are the most important factors actually on the basis of the science which determine the fertility aspect? The very first is female education. If you look at the overall scenario, not just at the level of India, but also at the global level, you'll see that it is one of the most important factors which decides the fertility is the female education. If the females are more educated, then we'll have less of fertility, right? Because they will have more of decision-making authority. Second is the urbanization. In the urban places where the competition is more, where the resources are not easily available, where the expenses are more. Obviously, over there, the families think and they try to restrain the total number of people in the whole family, right? Next is the income levels. As the income levels increase, what we also observe is that the fertility rates also decrease. This is a general observation. Then we have child's mortality. It also matters a lot because if adequate health provisions are not made, especially with respect to at the time of the pregnancy of the women, or in fact even after the birth, then it might lead to the mortality with respect to that particular child, and that also is one of the reasons for greater fertility rates. Then we have women's empowerment. If women are empowered, if they have adequate livelihood options, then obviously their tendency to increase the family would be less. Rather, they would focus more on the caregiving aspect of those limited number of children in the family, right? So this is also one of the very important aspect. Access to contraception. So if there is proper access to the contraception, then there would be naturally a lowering of the fertility rates. These are more important factors rather than just the social or the religious angles. That is what the author is trying to convey. Now, next aspect is with respect to the Bangladesh migration debate. See, if you look at the India-Bangladesh border, it is definitely a porous border. And we cannot negate or we cannot neglect the aspect that yes, it is a security issue. Definitely, it's a security issue. There is illegal arms trafficking. There is illegal, human trafficking. There is so much of these activities, drug trafficking and all that. But if you look at the historical and the cultural aspect, especially once you talk about the partition in 1947 and the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971, or if you look at the common riverine ecology which West Bengal and Bangladesh share, or if you look at the cultural aspect, you would see that there has been a constant interaction across the borders, but it must be regulated. But solely basing that argument that whatever transition we are witnessing in India, it is because of it's because of the illegal migrations which we have across the borders, that is not a right thing. This is what the author is saying. If you look at the Bangladesh economic transformation, because there is a narrative which is said that why more and more people from Bangladesh are coming into India is because India offers more economic opportunities. But the data tells us a different picture. World Bank data itself says that the per capita income, the growth in the per capita income from period of 2005 till 2023, for Bangladesh, it has been around 10.5% compound annual growth rate. And for India, it has been around 7.7%. So the per capita income growth rate in Bangladesh has been more than that of India. That's the first thing. Second thing, according to the UNDP, if you talk about the Human Development Index, the Human Development Index parameters are broadly almost the same with respect to India and Bangladesh. There is not much of difference. So this aspect, this basis that economic distress in Bangladesh is forcing more people to come to India for economic opportunities, that's not something which is digestible. Rather, there can be some other issues. And also, one more fact, that whatever migrations we are witnessing or illegal migrations we are witnessing across the borders, that cannot be reflected as something which is responsible for the overall demographic transition of India, right? Because overall demographic transition of India is a much bigger fact, not just dependent on this particular aspect. What are the major issues? The major issue is politicization of demography. What the author is saying is that demography is something which is a very scientific discipline. It should involve the study on the basis of facts, on the basis of logic, on the basis of the data, and not just the stereotypes and not just these biases in the societies. Because if we'll do this, it would lead to identity politics. And identity politics, wherever we are witnessing right now, it is leading to the distrust among the society. It is leading to the erosion of the harmony in the society. That's the very first thing. Second thing which the author is saying is that we need to go for evidence-based policy making. And right now there is this deficit. We are not rather focusing on the evidence, rather we are focusing on the other aspects. The census has already been delayed. Ideally it should have been conducted earlier, and even the report or even the numbers of this particular census which is being conducted, it would come after 2-3 years. So the study of the population, if we don't go for a regular census, or if we don't go for a regular numbering of the population, data, the study of the population, then that is something which would compromise the overall aspect, overall demographic study. So we need to go for more of academic research, be in terms of the census or be in terms of, let's say, the NFHS, right? So that we can have more robust policy making. Third thing is risk of social polarization. If these things continue in the society, if we just look at these particular things from that lens of the religion or that lens of the differences on the basis of caste or ethnicity, then this is going to increase polarization in a society. And India has always been a society which is composed of diversities, be it the religious diversity, be it the ethnicity, be it the racial diversity. So we cannot allow this particular polarization in India to continue. This is what the author is saying. Next, neglect of real demographic challenges. This is again a very important point. What is the main issue? Please understand. Are we catering or are we looking at the more important issues? Are we giving importance to those issues which are really important? We are having a youth bulge. We are having a good number of youths in the country. Are we providing the adequate employment opportunities to them? There are so many brilliant minds over here. Many of the people, the pass outs of the IITs and the AIMS, why they are going to the other countries? Why they're not staying here itself? There must be some reasons, right? Because over there, they have good facilities. Over there, they're being paid much better. And in India, look at, even if you're getting a good pay in India, look at the condition of the pollution you have, the standards of living over here in India. What was the condition just before a few months in winters, especially in the NCR region, with respect to the air pollution? So it is becoming a gas chamber. There are other factors also. So you are not focusing on the more important issues. This is what the author is saying. The very first is the employment and the skills. How much importance you are giving to the skill acquisition or skill upgradation of the people. Industry needs something and you don't have the adequate people with that requisite skills. So there's a mismatch. You're talking about the artificial intelligence, you're talking about the emerging technologies, but do we have people who are adequately trained in that particular domain? Do we have enough number of people? So this is again a serious issue. Even in agriculture, let's keep this particular thing aside. Let's talk about agriculture. We are witnessing disguised unemployment over there. More and more people are jumping into agriculture. Almost more than 45% of the population is engaged in agricultural activities. So this is a very, very big number. And this is contributing only around 18% to the gross value addition. So this is again, there's an inequality which is being observed. Employment or the livelihood opportunities or the skills. Next, we have health. We still have the health deficit. The out-of-pocket expenditure may have reduced, but still this is one of the most important reasons for going back into the poverty trap. Because the expenses of the people, we may have come up with the Ayushman Bharat and other schemes, but in the remote corners, but in the deep corners or deep interiors of the country, people still don't have access to basic health services. We may have AIIMS or top tier hospitals in the metropolitan cities, but what about the interiors? That is again a point of concern. And since we are going to have a more aged population, what about the geriatric facilities? So this has to be kept in mind. Aging population, dependency ratio is going to increase. Do we have adequate number of healthcare professionals, or do we have adequate number of facilities in the hospitals to cater to the growing number of the disease, and especially the non-communicable diseases with respect to the elderly population? Do we have adequate number of these caregivers? Okay. Regional demographic imbalances. The demographic study which we are doing, okay, we are focusing on the illegal infiltration which is happening across the borders, definitely. But are we giving due importance to the regional imbalances? We already know that the total fertility rate of the South Indian states is dipping far more. It's dipping faster than that of the North Indian states. And that has a repercussion, because if you look at the political power, if you look at the delimitation aspect, or if you look at the financial devolution, adequate funds with these states, because population is one of the criterias. So if the population of these South Indian states is lesser, would be lesser than the North Indian states, obviously they would have less of political power. Obviously they'll have less of the funding, even though they are the ones who are contributing more to the GDP of the country. So this should be understood. We need to have a proper study of the demography, and then we need to come up with the various policies, be it political representation or financial devolution. Look at this, very important data. It says nearly 40% of Indian graduates under the age of 25 are unemployed. Can you imagine? Think for a while. 40% of the Indian graduates, almost 50%, under 25 years of age are unemployed, says the report by Azim Premji Foundation. So this is the condition which we have. So this is a kind of a distraction also, because people are quite reactive once you talk about the emotional issues, once you talk about the religious divisions in the society. I'm not negating the fact that there is no illegal migration. There is illegal migration. There are people who are affecting the security of the state. But is that only the factor to be considered for the overall demographic transition? The answer is no. Rather than that, we should focus on more important issues. Because in order to distract people, you can come up with narratives, but that is not going to work. Let's talk about the international examples. Japan is witnessing an aging population. It does not have the adequate labor. It is witnessing labor shortages. And therefore, it is calling for more and more number of people. It has opened the gates. Let's talk about China. China came up with the one-child policy. And now it is bearing the brunt of it. It is now asking people to increase the fertility rates. So this is again a point of concern. What is Europe doing? In Europe, what we are witnessing is the aging population. They don't have the adequate number of people who can contribute to the economy. So they are asking for a limited intake. They're going for a limited intake of the people from across different countries. Limited migration is what they're following. What should be the practical way forward? The very first is evidence-based demographic policy. We cannot just have this notion. Definitely there can be some element of truth that there are people who are trying to basically affect the national security. And there might be some people who are coming across the border from Bangladesh and affecting national security. Those must be properly catered to. Those must be properly handled. But what about the larger issues? Are you just basing your argument on that particular illegal infiltration? Or you are looking at a more broad perspective? So we need to go for more evidence-based policy making, expedite the census, so that you have robust data with you. Migration databases need to be developed. If you're saying that migration is an issue, where is the database? So we need to come up with a database also. Address the illegal immigration through border management. And recently the Home Minister also talked about the smart border comprehensive approach, which we would follow at India's border with Pakistan, with Bangladesh, specifically with Bangladesh. Then we have technology-enabled surveillance, use of the floodlights, use of those barbed wires. So we need to have more of technology, use of surveillance, so that we can observe the thermal cameras, right? include demographic experts in the committees. You have IAS, IPS officers, you have Supreme Court judge, but you don't have a demographic expert in the committee. So how would the committee study the demography itself? So this is a point of concern. Focus on real demographic priorities, be it the human capital development in terms of the education, in terms of the health, in terms of the skill development, in terms of the skill upgradation. So these issues must be focused on. For example, in terms of the National Skill Development Mission, for example, in terms of Ayushman Bharat, for example, in terms of the elder care population, the elderly population, in terms of we have the pension schemes, Indira Gandhi National Pension Scheme. So these things must be focused on, the real issues. Then we have healthcare access and the elderly welfare, right? Promote social cohesion. Again, as I said, that India is a country which has a lot of diversity. These things would only deepen distrust among the people. So we need to have an approach which basically goes for social cohesion. We cannot have these demographic anxieties which enhance or which increase the distrust among the people. That is again going to make the India as a whole weak. So we cannot basically go with this. So what you'll have to understand is that the study of demography is really very important, but it should not be based, what the author is saying is, it should not be based on certain elements. That is illegal migration or just the distribution on the basis of the religion or various other social factors. Rather, we need to have a more broad perspective. We need to look or cater to the more important issues, and that is how we'll be able to become Viksit Bharat by 2047. That is what the idea we have set. So this is what you'll have to understand. Let's have a mains practice question, and today I've just given a 10 marker so you can easily write this. The discourse on demographic change in India is increasingly intersecting with the issues of migration, religion and national security. While such concerns merit attention, demographic policy making must remain grounded in empirical evidence. Very, very important question. It has been framed in such a way that you can write a very well balanced answer. So do write this, 10 marker, 150 words, and yes, if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button. And also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about the deficient southwest monsoon. The Indian Meteorological Department has projected a weak monsoon this year. Now this can have severe repercussions, severe implications on various sectors of the economy. This calls for a proactive approach. This calls for a greater preparedness with respect to handling this particular deficit in the monsoon. India must brace itself for a deficient southwest monsoon, very important part of GS1 and GS3 economy. Now, what is the context? The context is that IMD has projected the weak monsoon for 26, and this can have serious effects on the agricultural aspect, on the food security, on the livelihood aspect, and overall economy, including the environmental aspect. Why? Because the monsoon, there has been a delay with respect to the reaching of the southwest monsoon to Kerala. Ideally, it was supposed to land on June 1st, but it has landed on June 4th. So there has been a 3 days delay. The IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, has said that the seasonal rainfall is at only 90% of the long period average. What is long period average? This is generally an average of the rainfall over a 50 years period. So for the IMD takes it as from 1961 till 2010. And this is somewhere around 880 millimeters. Right. So this is going to be just 90% of the long period average, and there is a 60% probability of a deficient monsoon this year. Now, why this is a cause of concern? Because this is the most pessimistic, most negative projection of the IMD in the last decade, in 1 year, right? In the last 10 years, sorry. The heat waves, again, see, we have, first of all, a delay in the monsoon. Second, we are also having the issues, and just before a few days we covered in the Analyst, I myself covered that, the heat waves aspect. The heat waves are increasing. Now, this is something which is a cause and effect relation. The more you're going to have the delay in the monsoons, the more the heat waves would be. The more the heat waves would be, the worsening condition we would observe as far as the overall living aspect is concerned. Why? Because if you have less of the monsoon, the soil would have less moisture. The soil would become more dry. Dry land basically absorbs heat faster, and therefore it would be a kind of a causative factor for the heat waves also. It would increase the heat waves. Okay? And therefore this calls for the governance, urban planning and public health challenge. It's not just one particular aspect, rather it includes all the aspects. Now this concern is amplified. It is increasing. Why? Because of multiple factors. The very first is, as I already told you, the heat waves. Heat waves are increasing, and therefore it is an alarm bell for the whole population. Second is the El Nino. El Nino is projected this particular year. What is El Nino? It is basically the warming of the central and the eastern Pacific. So this ultimately results in weak monsoons over India. Okay? So this is a cause of concern. Third is the West Asian crisis. Why? Because in the West Asia, we are witnessing a crisis over there, and this has severely affected the supply of oil and natural gas to India. Natural gas forms a very important precursor for the production of fertilizers. You talk about urea, you talk about ammonia. There has been an increase in the overall prices. So the input costs are also increasing. The input cost with respect to the fertilizer, and therefore farmers would have to bear the brunt. This is what you'll have to understand. So there are multiple factors which are going around, and we'll have a look regarding that. But why is monsoon really important for a country like India? Because if you look at the overall rainfall which India gets over the period of 1 year, almost 75% of this particular rainfall is attributed to the southwest monsoon during these months, 3-4 months. So southwest monsoon play a very important role. It supports the food security, it supports the agriculture, it supports the livelihoods, it supports the hydropower generation. It basically makes sure that the reservoirs in the country, they are basically filled. They are optimally recharged. Okay? It has a relation with almost every aspect of human life. That is the reason monsoons are very, very important. Okay? Almost 52% of the India's net sown area, it remains rain-fed. Can you just imagine? More than 50% of the net sown area, it is dependent on the rains. It's not dependent on the irrigation facilities, be it canals or the drip irrigation or the micro irrigation. No, it's just dependent on the rains. And nearly 45 to 50% of the overall workforce is engaged in agriculture. So this speaks about the importance of monsoon. And that is how it makes important for all the sectors of the economy. Okay? And also we have a data which you can use while you are writing the answers. If there's a dip, if there's a decline by 1% in the monsoon rainfall, ultimately it reduces the GDP, the agricultural GDP by almost 0.3 to 0.5%. This is the effect of less monsoons on the agricultural productivity, on the overall production. Okay? Why 26 is more concerning? Because first, see, we may have a normal monsoon, but distribution also matters. Previously we used to have a balanced form of rain distribution. But now because of the climate change, and primarily because of the anthropogenic climate change, the human-induced climate change, what we are witnessing is that we are witnessing long dry spells. We are witnessing short, intense, heavy rainfalls in a particular period of time, and then break periods where we have long dry spell. For example, in the year 2023, what happened? That we witnessed heavy, intense rainfall for a short period of time in the states of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. And at the same time, the eastern parts of India were dry. So this calls for a kind of, this is something which we are witnessing because of the human-induced climate change. And this is not good, because if there is uneven rainfall, ultimately it's going to affect the people at large, right? A monsoon can be normal overall, but still harmful because of the kind of distribution it is having, the kind of pattern it is following. There can be balanced rainfall over a particular duration of time, and there can be intense rainfall over a short duration. And that can lead to urban flooding, for example. It can lead to flooding at the mountains, and that can also lead to the landslides. It can lead to the avalanches. So this is what you'll have to understand, right? Next is role of El Nino. So this is what the El Nino is. See, in a normal year, what usually happens, we have the western part which remains warm, and therefore there's a good monsoon in the Indian subcontinent part. But once we talk about the El Nino year, what really happens is the central and the eastern parts of the Pacific, they are relatively more warm. So therefore, the monsoon weakens. The strength of the monsoon weakens in the El Nino years, weakens the monsoon circulation, and it also raises the drought risk. Why? Because the overall rainfall reduces. And once the overall rainfall reduces, it basically reduces the soil moisture. And therefore, the chances or the risk of drought increases. Okay? Look at this major El Nino drought years. In 2002, there was severe drought. In 2009, there was again severe drought. In 2014, below normal monsoon. 15, below normal monsoon. And it has been seen that in almost 60% of the El Nino years since 1951, we have had almost weakened monsoon or drought in various parts of the country, in almost 60% of the El Nino years. So this is a point of concern. Next, the input crisis. We already have the El Nino, we already have the heat waves, we are already having the human-induced climate change, because of which the distribution is uneven. We have erratic rainfalls over here. Okay? In addition, we are witnessing the vegetation crisis. Farmers are dependent on the rain-fed agriculture. Farmers are dependent on the rains. Farmers are also dependent on the fertilizers. But for the fertilizers, we need the precursor. We need the natural gas for the production of the fertilizers in terms of the urea or in terms of ammonia. And the prices have significantly increased. So again, the brunt has to be borne by the farmers. How much of the subsidy would the government give? That is also you'll have to understand. So this is again energy crisis, and this would have inflationary trends. It would have inflationary trends with respect to the inputs which are used in the agriculture, and that would have a kind of a domino effect on various sectors of the economy. Okay? Also, we have the heat wave intensification. According to the World Meteorological Organization, the year 2025-26 has been the warmest on record. And we are witnessing temperatures, those are unprecedented. 45, 46 is such, it has become a normal thing. So this is again a cause of concern. What are the major challenges? The major challenges are, the very first, that if there is a deficit in the rainfall, if the prices of, let's talk about the prices of these inputs, the liquefied natural gas supply, if it increases, then there would be issues with respect to agriculture. Why? Because less of the southwest monsoon and these input costs, it would basically make the farmer distressed. It would lead to low crop yields. It would lead to crop failures. And therefore, again, it can lead to the rural distress. Okay? Next is water security challenges. We have a lot of reservoirs. And these reservoirs across the country, they are dependent on the rains for their, for their filling. But if we will not have proper rains, these reservoirs would be depleted. And then it would also lead to the issue with respect to the groundwater recharge, the aquifer recharge. Okay? Then we have the economic challenges. In terms of if the overall prices in the agriculture increase, if the input prices increase, obviously it would have inflationary trends. And if there would be the inflationary trends, what would really happen is it would affect the lowest socio-economic strata the most, the poor people. They would not have, because they don't have the adequate purchasing power. So again, this is a cause of concern. And RBI has said it many times that food inflation remains one of the biggest driving factors of the overall inflation. Okay. Next is environmental challenge. If we are going to have such a situation, dry situation, then this is going to affect the biodiversity also. This is going to affect the soil also. The soil would degrade. Because once the soil becomes dry, the soil erosion also increases due to the wind, the gully erosion and all that. So what you'll have to understand is it would have repercussions in almost every sector. That is what you'll have to understand. What needs to be done, what the government needs to do at this point of time. Very important. The very first is the climate smart cropping strategy. We cannot be just, dependent on these water intensive crops. The rice wheat system. For example, in those regions of the country which are already having a deficit with respect to the groundwater, we are planting or we are going for this particular rice wheat system in the western Uttar Pradesh or Punjab or Haryana. So rather we should go for different crops. Rather we should go for pulses. We should go for millets. We should go for short duration crops. And these are the ones, the pulses, for example, they are high protein. So again, they are good for the nutritional part also, right? So that must be adopted. For example, we have the National Food Security Mission. We have the Millets Mission. That should be taken forward. Then we have strengthened the water management, the integrated water management. We should go for more of rainwater harvesting. We should go for less of the usage or extraction of the groundwater, because the groundwater recharge takes time. And if we'll have less of rainfall, obviously the aquifers would not be recharged. So that is a point of concern. For example, we have Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. So we should rather focus on micro irrigation or drip irrigation, which are more efficient. Okay? Let's talk about the groundwater regulation in terms of the Atal Bhujal Yojana. So we need to make sure that there is less of extraction of the groundwater. The aquifers need to be mapped. There has to be a proper study of these aquifers, the groundwater aquifers, so that according to the level of the water which these aquifers have, we extract the water. Okay? Then we have crop insurance. In case of the failure of the crops, the claims should be settled in a very quick manner, in a very efficient manner, because farmers, they take a lot of loans. So they need to have the working capital. They need to basically make sure that they return their debts. So therefore, it has to be quick and it has to be efficient. The claim settlement. For example, we have the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, right? Next, we have the heat action plans. Very, very important. We already have Ahmedabad, for example, which has come with the heat action plan. This should be followed by various metropolitan cities. What is heat action plan? Which focuses upon the cooling shelters, which focuses upon the workers who are outside, who basically bear the brunt of the heat. What all measures can be put in place so that the overall heat reduces. The diseases with respect to the heat, the dehydration and the strokes, they reduce. For example, we have the Ahmedabad heat action plan. Disaster preparedness. We need to have a more coordinated approach. We cannot have just one particular ministry. Now, see, things are becoming quite interlinked. So we need to have the agriculture ministry, we need to have the Jal ministry, we need to have the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. We need to have the IMD. So they need to collaborate. In fact, the state governments, including at the district level. So there has to be a proper coordinated approach, a real-time approach, which focuses upon the alerts given by the IMD, and then suitable preparedness plans need to be worked at the district level by the respective district magistrates. This is what you'll have to understand. So this is a very serious point of concern, because it now not just relates to the agriculture aspect, rather it also talks about the other aspects, economic aspect, the food security aspect, the environmental aspect, which concerns almost every section of the society. So therefore, this is a very serious concern which we need to address. Let's have a mains practice question, again a 10 marker. Multiple factors combined have heightened the concerns regarding India's monsoon-dependent economy. Examine the implications of a deficient monsoon and suggest suitable measures to enhance India's climate resilience. 10 marker, 150 words. Do write, because this is the only way to make sure that you are ready for the mains. Very, very important. Keep writing. You may be knowledgeable, but if you're not writing, then probably you're not going in the right direction. So please make sure that you give enough impetus, enough importance to the writing part. Let's go to the next section. Now, coming to the mains value addition part, we have the first topic which talks about the ordinance route. Now, we have Article 123, which very clearly gives the power to the President of India to issue ordinances when either or both the houses of the Parliament are not in session. Now, there are two things which emerge out here. The very first is, we have a column which has been published in the Hindu which talks about this, that recently an ordinance was promulgated which seeks to enhance the strength of the Supreme Court judges, and accordingly the additional judges have been appointed. Second thing is with respect to the re-promulgation of the ordinances. If there is a re-promulgation of the ordinance, that means that the parliamentary scrutiny is being bypassed. That does not augur well, it does not reflect well for a parliamentary democracy like India. Therefore, at different points of time, the Supreme Court has taken a quite tough stance with respect to the re-promulgation of the ordinance without going for the scrutiny by the Parliament. And there are two very important cases. The very first is DC Wadhwa versus State of Bihar of 86, where it called the governance by re-promulgation of the ordinance as a fraud on the Constitution. So you can use this in your answers. In the second case, in the Krishna Kumar Singh versus State of Bihar of 2017, a 7-judge bench ruled against the using ordinance making power as parallel source of legislation. Please understand, ordinance making power is something which should be used quite sparingly, should be used in certain circumstances only, not as a usual source of legislation, not as a normal source of legislation. This is what you'll have to understand. Coming to the second topic, we have a mention of Major Abhilasha Barak. Now, she is serving in the UN peacekeeping and she has been awarded a prize by the United Nations, and Prime Minister Modi has really praised her efforts. Now, this is something which can be used in any of the questions where you're talking about the women empowerment, or you're talking about the role of the women, or you're writing about the aspirations of women to join the armed forces, or the aspirations of women to contribute in a more significant manner in the decision-making affairs. So just go through this. Modi congratulates Major Abhilasha Barak on the UN award. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Sunday congratulated Major Abhilasha Barak on being conferred the UN Military Gender Advocate of the Year award, and said that the honor is a recognition of her exemplary service and also of India's long-standing contribution to the United Nations peacekeeping efforts. Major Barak, currently serving with the United Nations mission in Lebanon, has been honored with the award for her outreach efforts with the women and girls during her deployment in the West Asian nation. I already know that this particular region is in a state of turmoil. We are already having the Israelis who are attacking Lebanon, right? So again, very quite a tense situation over here. She's also the first woman combat helicopter pilot of the Indian Army. So again, very important, can be used as an example. Third is with respect to a case study, which talks about the pathetic, which talks about the bad condition which we still have with respect to the hygiene, especially in the context of the menstrual population, right? Poor facilities force Odisha girls to skip school during menstruation. And look at this. Absenteeism from school during menstruation continues to be a major concern for female students across Odisha, with nearly 74% of them missing anywhere between 1 to 8 days of classes per cycle, according to a study on menstrual health released here. So this talks about the importance which we should give as far as the overall women empowerment is concerned, the women health is concerned, because health is again a very important part of GS2. Health is a very important construct of the social justice. So this can be used as a case study while you are writing the answer, right? Now coming to the prelims pointer section, we have the very first topic which talks about the PM E-Drive scheme. Government plans to induct almost 2,800 low-floor e-buses under PM E-Drive scheme. What is this particular scheme? Again, PIB has now become an obsession for the students. So I've taken this particular screenshot from the PIB itself. Look at this. It's from the Ministry of Heavy Industries. So the scheme is of the Ministry of Heavy Industries. The PM Electric Drive Revolution in Innovative Vehicle Enhancement, PM E-Drive, has accelerated the adoption of electric vehicles across the country by providing targeted demand incentives for multiple EV segments, including E2-wheelers, E3-wheelers, and e-ambulances, e-trucks, thereby reducing the upfront costs of electric mobility. Under the scheme, what the scheme does, the upfront incentives are provided to consumers, the buyers and users, to reduce the purchase price of the electric vehicles, which are reimbursed to the original equipment manufacturers by the Government of India. The scheme supports more than 28 lakh EVs as on 27 January 2026, a total of 22.12 lakh EVs have been sold under the scheme. So again, this is contributing to the overall acceptance and the enhancement of the electric vehicles, so that we can also reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. We can achieve the nationally determined contributions. So very, very important scheme. Go through this. And this is the list of eligible categories: E2-wheelers, E3-wheelers, e-ambulance, e-trucks, e-buses, charging infrastructure, upgradation of testing agencies. So again, quite an important scheme. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about the Central Bureau of Investigation. The CBI has conducted searches at 6 premises in connection with a large-scale misappropriation and fraud case allegedly involving IDFC First Bank and AU Finance Bank. So let's go through what CBI is all about. The Central Bureau of Investigation is a premier investigation police agency in India, provides assistance to the Central Vigilance Commission and Lokpal. It functions under the superintendence of the Department of Personnel, Ministry of Personnel, Pensions and Public Grievance. This was a question which was asked this year itself. So it comes under Ministry of Personnel, not the Ministry of Home Affairs. However, for the investigation of offences under the Prevention of Corruption Act, its superintendence vests with the Central Vigilance Commission. So for all the cases, the superintendence is with the Ministry of Personnel. With respect to the cases of Prevention of Corruption Act, the superintendence and the jurisdiction lies under the Central Vigilance Commission. It is also the nodal police agency in India which coordinates with the Interpol. So it is the National Crime Bureau with respect to the Interpol for India. Its conviction rate is as high as 65 to 70% and is comparable to the best investigation agencies of the world. Historical background: during the period of World War II, a special police establishment, SP, was constituted in 1941 in the Department of War of the British India to inquire into the allegations of bribery and corruption. Later, it was formalized as an agency of the Government of India to investigate into the allegations of corruption in various wings of the Government of India by enacting the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. CBI is not a statutory body but derives its power to investigate from the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. The establishment of the CBI was recommended by the Santanam Committee on Prevention of Corruption in 1960s. In 1963, the CBI was established by the Government of India with a view to investigate serious offences related to the defence of India, corruption in high places, serious fraud, cheating and embezzlement of funds and other crimes, particularly hoarding, black marketing and other things. With the passage of time, CBI started investigations in conventional crimes, for example, assassinations, heinous murders and all that, kidnappings, hijackings. What types of cases are handled by the CBI? Anti-corruption crimes, then economic crimes for investigation of major financial scams, for example, in this particular case itself. currency notes, bank fraud, cybercrime, special crimes for investigation of serious organized crime under the Indian Penal Code and other laws on the request of state governments, for example, terrorism, bomb blast, kidnapping, ransom, and other, or on the orders of the Supreme Court or the High Courts. Suo moto cases, CBI can also suo moto take up cases by only in the union territories. So suo moto only in the union territories, not in the states. Over there, it has to require the consent of the respective states. But if the order is passed by the High Court, respective High Court or the Supreme Court, then no consent is needed. The central government can authorize CBI to investigate a crime in the state, but only with the consent of the concerned state government. The Supreme Court and the High Courts, however, can order the CBI to investigate a crime anywhere in the country without the consent of the state. That is what you have to understand with respect to the functioning of CBI. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about the Indian Council of Medical Research. What the Indian Council of Medical Research is all about. In 1911, the government of India set up the Indian Research Fund Association with the specific objective of sponsoring and coordinating the medical research in the country. After independence, it was redesignated as the Indian Council of Medical Research in 1949. It is the apex body for the formulation, coordination, and promotion of biomedical research. Autonomous body, conducts, coordinates, implements the medical research for the benefit of society, translating the medical innovations into products, processes, and introducing them into the public health systems. The organizational structure, the governing body of the ICMR is presided by the Union Health Minister. So this comes under the Department of Health Research in the Union Ministry of Health. Assisted in scientific and technical matters by the Scientific Advisory Board, comprising eminent experts in different biomedical disciplines. So you have a Director General who is the executive head of this particular organization, and the governing body is presided by the Union Health Minister. Research is carried out currently through the Council's 32 permanent research institute centers, which are mission-oriented national institutes located in different parts of India. So again, it is an autonomous body, and the apex body with respect to the biomedical research did a very important work, especially in the COVID times. So this must be remembered. Let's go to the last topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion is a news which talks about the fact that Russia has striked the nuclear facilities of Ukraine. And again, this is very important. Russia fired waves of drones and other munitions at Ukraine on Sunday, killing at least 5 persons and damaging a nuclear storage facility in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, Ukrainian officials said. You can just have a look. Now, this is also an opportunity to talk about the various nuclear facilities in Ukraine. Very important. Look at this. Chernobyl. The disaster which took place in Chernobyl, it is located in Ukraine itself, and this is closed. Then we have the Rivno. Then we have Kalmensky. Then we have over here South Ukraine. We have Zaporozhye. Now this was also attacked by Russia recently. So this is what you'll have to understand. These are the important locations, right? And over here, these are the areas where the Russia has already made advances, and Crimea was already annexed by Russia in way back in the year 2014 itself. This is the Sea of Azov. This is the Black Sea. This is the Strait of Kerch. Remember this, very important. And over here you have the Sevastopol, strategic port, which now Russia has the access to, right? This is Zaporozhye nuclear power plant over here. You can just have a look. This was attacked by Russians, and understand that it's on the bank of the Dnieper River, which basically drains into the Black Sea. And this is where you have very important city, Kherson, because UPSC has seen, we have seen questions coming with respect to the places, with respect to the rivers. So you must know this, right? So this is again very important. Zaporozhye, we have the other places, Chernobyl, and also know the bordering countries of Ukraine. Very, very important. Do mention in the comments which are the bordering countries of Ukraine. That's all for today. I hope you really like the session. Thank you and all the very best.